Well, hello and happy holiday season, everyone. Well, much like the tagline in this movie says, hell has finally frozen over. I'm back. I definitely took some time off for a minute there. And it was for a whole bunch of just very boring and personal reasons. There were just a couple of things that I felt like I had to do, and one or two other small things that transpired. At this point, I will probably be back regularly, although in a slightly less involved capacity than I was before. So, for those few out there who maybe are curious, that's about as good as it's going to get. So, sometimes they come back for more. Yes, they do. And look, I'll admit it, the fact that this movie kind of affords me a bit of a cute movie title to resume writing reviews with is pretty much the entire reason that I'm even doing a review on it at all. Not because it is like objectively the worst thing I've ever seen, far from it. It's one of those movies that's probably too mediocre to hate in any way. Even by the standards of straight-to-video sequels in the 90s, this is an incredibly forgettable movie. And it's got maybe one line of dialogue in it, or two, to give it some semblance of connective tissue to the previous movies in the series, or at least the original, anyway. But that is mainly just there, I think, to try and sort of piggyback off that. There's no meaningful reason for this to be a sequel, and it wouldn't shock me if it was just a B-rate script that was lying around and they just slapped a couple of extra lines of dialogue in there just to give it an excuse to be part of this franchise in the hopes that it might sell more copies or more rentals. Because again, you have to remember, this was the 90s. Profiting from rentals on the video market was still very much a thing back then. And it's also a really handy get out of jail free card for any lackluster filmmakers out there, because this way, if the movie bombs, the shit really falls on the franchise's shoes and smears their face instead of the filmmakers in the long run. And it's kind of too bad, because for the first 20 to 30-ish minutes or so, I was kind of with this movie. I was well aware that it was a bargain basement ripoff of The Thing, at least in terms of its broad premise. The way that these characters are stranded in Antarctica, in a snowbound location, having to deal with each other in a small confined bunker, which in this case seems to mainly consist of dimly lit hallways. I mean, it's pretty obvious from the budgetary constraints that they probably only had like one room and one hallway to work with for this entire production, which would probably explain why there's so many scenes that get recycled of characters wandering down hallways and bickering with each other. But despite those limitations, the early passages of the movie utilize the limited set very well in terms of making it feel claustrophobic. You can tell that they definitely studied, maybe even to a fault, some of those sequences in The Thing in the hallways. Very oftentimes the camera is framed so that the characters are approaching it and looking forward, much like they did many shots in The Thing. And there's some good tracking shots here and there, some occasionally very nice and well executed overhead shots as well. Again, they're not doing anything new, but at least for those early passages, there was enough competent technique and one or two cool editing choices early on that kind of made me think, okay, the dismal reputation and rating this movie seems to have, probably not true. But then as the movie wore on, it just felt like it was ultimately going nowhere, and it really doesn't. It's a hard movie for me to even spoil, because if I spelled the plot out for you, it just wouldn't really make much sense. And there really isn't even much to talk about. I mean, once these military personnel get to the bunker, there's a lot of setup, which in the early going was okay for me. Like, I liked that it felt like they were initially just hinting at what was going to happen and keeping it mysterious. But then by the time you get to the payoff, you realize that it's more that they were hesitant to get to that because it's just kind of lame. The movie itself doesn't even really feel like it believes in its climax. For that matter, I don't think this movie really deep down believes in itself, period. It's got no real drive, no real reason for even existing that it exudes in any way. Even the actors themselves don't really sort of seem to be that into it, that invested, committed, grounded, anything. They do a lot of their takes in this movie like they know there's another take coming, or at least they probably wish there was now. I mean, I don't recognize a lot of the cast, but I can tell you that Clayton Rohner and Max Perlich are both very dependable character actors. In fact, Rohner made The Relic about a year before this, I think. It came out in 97. He came off as a very dependable supporting actor in that movie. You won't find that out here. I have no insight into how this movie was made whatsoever, but the whole thing really comes off like he just wasn't getting direction or didn't know how to follow the direction he was given or just felt uninspired by the script, in which case probably shouldn't have taken the job, but whatever. I really cannot remember a thing about his performance that stood out for me in any way at all. But on the other hand, the actors don't really have much of a chance with this script, which is so half-assed it isn't even really enough to qualify as a decent first draft, in my opinion. I don't really understand what drove anyone to make this movie or even pitch it. I don't know if it was perhaps some sort of contractual obligation. If it was, then that would probably explain a lot, because everything about this movie just sends the message that everybody just wanted to kind of get it over and done with and forget about it. Which is too bad, because there are the seeds here for a pretty decent little B-level, straight-to-video, guilty pleasure kind of horror movie. Maybe not the most original thing in the world, but it could have been made competently enough that it would be an entertaining 90-minute romp. As it stands, it's a movie that carries itself so tepidly and sheepishly and lifelessly that it might as well have been made by mice. Like, that's how little impact this movie makes when you're watching it. That's all I got. Unfortunately, do not go out of your way for this one. I was, again, doing it because the title seemed to ring true, and also just because I was looking to kind of expand my horizons in terms of the seasonal snowbound horror. Strictly Christmas movies was kind of limiting, so I thought I'd find something else wintry to see if that kind of scratched the itch. This one did not. And again, that's really all I have to say about it, because there's very little sort of thought or consideration or serious passion given to this movie. So as a result, I don't really have much to say about it one way or the other than repeating myself and saying that it's so limp and lame that it's not worth seeking out, even if you are sort of a Stephen King completionist. I would say skip this one. So that's it. Hopefully I'll have something more involved and interesting to talk about next time round, but for now, just stay tuned. I hope you guys are all having a great start to your holiday season, and I will catch you later.